From Toronto studios, this is Muslim News on Muslim Network TV. Assalamu alaikum, I'm Saamiyah. First, the headlines. U.S. police arrest protesters outside NRA convention in Texas. Disgust as Trump reads names of Uvalde victims at convention. Palestinians stage protests against Israeli flag march in Ramallah. Over 300 civilians died in Yemen over 3 years due to mines laid by Houthis. Unaccompanied women now banned from public transport in Afghanistan. Canada court reduces Quebec mosque killer's parole. Our top story tonight. On Saturday, dozens of people protested outside the NRA convention in Houston days after a mass shooting at a Texas elementary school left 19 children and 2 adults dead. Police arrested a man with a camera filming anti-gun protesters. The gunman in the May 24th shooting barricaded himself inside a 4th grade classroom at Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas. He then shot all 21 victims there. The 18-year-old shooter, whom authorities identified as Salvador Romas, is believed to have been shot and killed by a Border Patrol agent in an exchange of gunfire. Before the massacre, Ramos had wounded his grandmother. On Sunday, U.S. President Joe Biden and First Lady Jill Biden visited the Uvalde, Texas elementary school to grieve the 21 people killed there last week. A gunman shot and killed 19 children and 2 teachers at Robb Elementary School in about 83 miles west of San Antonio. The attack sparked protests and demands for national gun control reforms once again in the only nation where mass shootings are a common occurrence. Former President Donald Trump and Republican Senator Ted Cruz Friday addressed the National Rifle Association's conference in Houston this weekend. The gathering opened just 3 days after the mass shooting in Uvalde, Texas. Trump's speech drew criticism on social media for his reading of the Uvalde victims' names, each followed by a bell sound. He made a brief dance-like movement after concluding his remarks. An observer called it a grotesque caricature of sympathy. Trump rejected the idea that Congress should take up gun control legislation. He said it was necessary to harden our schools instead. The former president proposed all schools have a single entry point, armed officers, armed teachers, metal detectors, and classroom doors that lock from the inside. But the Associated Press reports that a locked classroom door kept victims in and police out. The U.S. Justice Department will review law enforcement response to the school shooting in Uvalde, Texas. The DOJ review comes amid mounting pressure and questions about contradictory information about what happened and how police responded in the shooting. On Sunday, Justice Department spokesman Anthony Coley said the review would be conducted in a fair, impartial, and independent manner. He said the goal is to provide an independent account of law enforcement actions and response that day. It also aims to identify lessons learned and best practices to help first responders prepare for and respond to active shooter events. On Wednesday, a Clifton, New Jersey woman was charged with bias crimes after allegedly screaming anti-Muslim slurs at 2 teenagers at a nail salon. Police said the woman struck 1 teen in the head in an unprovoked attack. 59-year-old Nancy Jones faces 2 counts of endangering the welfare of a child, bias, intimidation, and harassment, and simple assault, the Passaic County Prosecutor's Office said. Clifton police responded to a report of an assault around 2 p.m. on April 30th at New Nature Nails in North Jersey. 2 sisters ages 13 and 15 were waiting to get their nails done at the salon. The teens told officers Joan approached them in a harassing manner and told them to go back to their country. Authorities say Joan struck the 13-year-old in the head. Both girls wore a hijab and were born and raised in the United States, according to their mother. The East Plano Islamic Center started in 2004 hosting prayers out of a member's garage, said Mohammed Jawed Isa, a volunteer and former board president. Now, the nonprofit is one of the largest faith-based community and volunteer centers in North Texas. The more than 30,000 square foot facility houses daily prayers for thousands of Muslim community members. The center includes multiple gyms, educational facilities, free medical clinics, and is solely funded by volunteers, Isa said. It also hosts one of the largest weekly drive-through food distribution sites in the region. Isa estimated the center has provided more than 500,000 free meals to families. Authorities have identified a Minnesota man accused of attacking several racial minorities in Michigan with his vehicle and threatening mosques in Metro Detroit. Arnold Edward Ashland is being held at the Van Buren County Jail and facing charges of felonious assault and fleeing or eluding police. He is scheduled to appear for a hearing in July. Dearborn police said last month the 60-year-old white man has made threats about blowing up mosques in Metro Detroit. Police said he also intentionally rammed a vehicle into 11 vehicles driven by persons of color, according to victim statements. They said Ashland continued to make disparaging remarks about women and minorities during encounters with police. Our news story about the protests on Israeli Flag March is coming after the break, so stay tuned and we'll be right back after these messages.
If I could be you, and you could be me for just 1 hour. If we could find a way to get inside each other's minds. Walk a mile in my shoes. Walk a mile in my shoes. Well, before you abuse, criticize, and accuse. Walk a mile in my shoes.
There are 16 million children struggling with hunger in America. That's 1 in 5 daughters, sons, neighbors, and classmates who don't know where their next meal is coming from. Yet billions of pounds of good food go to waste every year. It's time we do something about it. Feeding America is a nationwide network of food banks that helps provide meals to millions of kids and families in need. Visit feedingamerica.org to help them feed even more. Together, we can solve hunger. Together, we're feeding America.
Despite the development of a COVID-19 vaccine, millions around the world will not have access. We need a vaccine that's free and available to everyone, everywhere. It's time for a people's vaccine.
Billboards are popping up all over the country with an...
Our neighbors don't realize that Muslims are absolutely opposed to ISIS.
Salam. My name is Abdul Malik Mujahid. I'm an imam in Chicago.
16 shots! No me!
No justice!
No me!
So how do we bring up the energy which can really have an impact on the world?
You need to build bridges of understanding among people, and we need to have America moving forward.
That lesson learned have brought the strength of humanity to America, which is the diversity.
Mujahid Talks, only on Muslim Network TV. Faithfully connected.
Assalamu alaikum! Open up your eyes.
Assalamu alaikum everyone, it's your brother Zain Bika from South Africa. One of the first educational programs ever produced for Muslim children was the ever popular Adam's World series. The colorful and comical Muslim puppets stole the heart of a generation. Sound Vision will be releasing brand new episodes of Adam's World with the launch of a Adam's World app. Subscribers will enjoy new Adam's World episodes as they are released, as well as all the classic episodes of Adam's World. So visit adamsworldapp.com now to learn more, subscribe, and enjoy new adventures of Adam and his friends. And let's keep helping tomorrow's Muslims today. Assalamu alaikum.
It's Adam's World. Believe me, there's a lot to see. Bismillah. Let's explore.
To stop this genocide, we need your help.
Welcome back. On Sunday, hundreds of Palestinians protested in Ramallah amid rising tensions over a planned march by Israeli settlers through occupied East Jerusalem. Tensions rose as Israeli forces intervened with tear gas. Thousands of Israeli settlers gathered in the Bab al-Ahmad area to participate in the controversial flag march to mark what they called the Day of Unifying Jerusalem. That is a reference to Israel's occupation of the city during the 1967 Six-Day War, which was started by Israel. Israel-occupied East Jerusalem, where the Al-Aqsa Mosque complex is located. It illegally annexed the city in 1980 in a move never recognized by the international community. In related news, thousands of flag-waving Israelis marched into the Muslim quarter of Jerusalem's Old City through Damascus Gate. The nationalistic procession regularly stokes Palestinian anger a year after tensions in East Jerusalem exploded into war. A total of 372 civilians have been killed and 754 others injured in 3 years due to mines planted by Iranian-backed Houthis in Yemen, a local NGO reported. The Yemeni Mine Observatory said Houthis have placed thousands of anti-personnel landmines and explosives of various sizes in many parts of the country. The group also called on the Houthis to hand over the mine maps to relevant authorities to avoid further casualties. Human rights groups estimate that there are more than 8,000 Yemeni landmine victims, mostly women and children. On Saturday, UN Human Rights Chief Michelle Bachelet ended a 6-day visit to China. She said her week-long trip was an opportunity to hold direct discussions with senior Chinese officials and was not an investigation. Bachelet held a virtual press conference from Beijing due to China's strict COVID-19 restrictions on Saturday. Her visit, years in the making after mounting international controversy about the treatment of Uyghurs, was criticized by human rights NGOs. Bachelet said official visits by a high commissioner are high profile and simply not conducive to the kind of detailed, methodical, discreet work of an investigative nature. She held discussions with China's most senior leaders on human rights and had a virtual meeting with President Xi Jinping. Bachelet also visited the Xinjiang cities of Urumqi and Kashgar, seeing a prison and a former re-education camp. She said she raised questions and concerns about the application of counterterrorism and de-radicalization measures there. On Friday, a man who shot 6 Muslims at a Quebec City mosque will be eligible for parole after 25 years rather than 40, the Supreme Court of Canada ruled. Alexander Bissonnette was 27 when he went on a killing spree on January 29, 2017. He shot and killed 6 worshippers at the Centre Culturel Islamique de Quebec and injured 19 others. Bissonnette was sentenced in 2019 to 40 years in prison before he would become eligible for parole. The defense and the prosecution appealed the sentence. The defense argued the time should be reduced to 25 years, while prosecutors called for a stiffer parole ruling of 50 years. The court said the original 40-year sentence was unconstitutional. On Saturday, a Taliban official with the Ministry of Vice and Virtue announced that women are barred from using public transportation by themselves. The Taliban had previously decreed women traveling inside or outside of the country must be accompanied by a mahram, a male relative such as a brother, father, or son. This is the latest in a series of moves imposing strict measures by the Taliban government, similar to its first term in power in the late 1990s. In the last few weeks, girls and women have been barred from secondary school education, and the wearing of a burqa has become mandated for all older girls and women. Islamic scholars in and outside of Afghanistan have spoken up against the Taliban's orders. Coming up after the break is our in-depth analysis segment, so stay tuned and we'll be right back after these messages.
If I could be you, and you could be me for just 1 hour. Walk a mile in my shoes. Walk a mile in my shoes.
Assalamu alaikum. This is Imam Malik Mujahid in Chicago. Just like you, I was moved by that Allahu Akbar lady. She stood her ground, fearful of none, for her hijab and for her education. Sisters and brothers, Indian Muslims are facing a genocide. India does not care for Muslim protesting, but it does care for the world opinion. Therefore, we must push the United Nations. The UN has a responsibility to protect. They must prevent genocide. Please sign this UN petition now. Get others to sign. It will help. Trust me, it will help. We need 1 million signatures, brothers and sisters. Please sign now.
Despite the development of a COVID-19 vaccine, millions around the world will not have access. We need a vaccine that's free and available to everyone, everywhere. It's time for a people's vaccine.
Dad, they took over my bedroom. Come on, come on. Okay, Dad. 1, 2, 3. Dad! You saved me. Dad?
Are you okay?
I'm fine, dear.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need at aarp.org/caregiving.
We are Justice for All. Headquartered in the heart of downtown Chicago, Justice for All is a global humanitarian initiative dedicated to raising awareness for human rights concerns impacting vulnerable minority groups. Our diverse team of staff and volunteers, led by Imam Malik Mujahid, work tirelessly to help Justice for All achieve their goals. We promote policies that protect religious freedom, address the root causes of mass displacement, and recognize the plight of refugees and forced migrants. Together, we can continue to stand up for justice. Justice for all.
Welcome back. With the tragic shooting in Uvalde, Texas, discussion over the Second Amendment, the right to keep and bear arms, has sparked once again. The National Rifle Association, the self-described longest-standing civil organization, is right in the center of that discussion. But what is their role and what can they do about mass shootings? For our in-depth analysis today, we have with us Roxanne Dunbar-Ortiz. Roxanne is a historian, writer, activist, and the author of the book, Loaded, A Disarming History of the Second Amendment. Welcome to the show, Roxanne. It's great to have you here with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Roxanne, I'll jump right into it. In your book, you look at the connection between the NRA and previous mass shootings in America. What are some of the connections that you took note of?
Well, I think it's important to know that the National Rifle Association, although it was founded in the late 1880s after the Civil War for teaching young men target practice, it developed as a sort of commercial nonprofit of hunting, hunting, target practicing, and really didn't have the characteristics it has today. It didn't talk really at all about the Second Amendment that much. And it was rather empowered by Congress as a representation of the Second Amendment in the few times it had any role at all, like in the 1930s when the NRA chief was called to Congress to testify about if there was any breach of the Second Amendment in the banning of automatic machine guns being used by gangs in New York during Prohibition. And the NRA's representative said, no, there's absolutely no problem with the Second Amendment. And that is really all that ever happened, with the NRA. Certainly not as it is today. And then This was at a time when white supremacy reigned. It was a white republic, founded as a white republic. Black people were completely under segregation, Jim Crow laws. Native Americans were concentrated on reservations. Mexican farm workers had no rights. And then everything began to change after World War II with the civil rights movement, massive marches for rights, equal rights. So in that process, many hardcore white supremacist organizations were founded. And the NRA itself was infiltrated and taken over by a white supremacist group called the Second Amendment Foundation in 1977. They were founded in 1974 with the purpose of taking over the National Rifle Association, which already had nonprofit status and funding and so forth. Second Amendment Foundation was a kind of backwater white nationalist organization. So all of that background is to tell you what's rarely mentioned in the media is the politics since 1977 of the National Rifle Association. You've probably heard about the white replacement theory. Well, that terminology is new, but it's not new that white people felt threatened by both immigration, non-white people, and by, of course, Black people gaining any kind of political power. So that sort of sets up what the NRA is really about. It's not really a lobby, which is often called. It actually puts very little money into politicians. It has a mass white base, white settler base, that believes that this is the only instrument they have to maintain white supremacy is the Second Amendment.
Roxanne, how does all of this apply to the recent shooting in Uvalde, Texas?
The mass shootings, including the most recent last two and this one Uvalde in Texas, the NRA, as you probably know, went ahead with their convention, which was already scheduled for the weekend after this past weekend, after the Tuesday shooting of the children, the 19 children and 2 teachers at the Uvalde school with an AR-15, which isn't really an assault rifle, but it is a high-powered, rapid-fire, absolutely murderous weapon. And they kept a kind of low profile in their statements, thoughts and prayers and all that, but said this has nothing to do with guns, it has to do with mental health, it has to do with, and the governor was saying that too, but in Texas, they had just slashed from the budget almost all funding for mental health in Texas. So that's obviously hypocritical. If that were the case, that putting, states and counties and the federal government would be putting huge amounts of money. And there is a lack of mental health care in the United States, but hardly anyone with mental issues goes out and buys an AR-15 and shoots up a school or anything else. Usually, if anything, they commit suicide on a very large basis, very tragically. So it's sort of scapegoating a powerless group of people, saying they're at fault, not the proliferation guns and the ease of getting guns, and the whole romantic image, the Wild West and all, and the obvious masculine toxicity that pervades the country. So that I think is they exploited it, but they also, I think, were really scrambling to not be targeted
As you've said, the NRA does have quite an influence, whether it's directly or indirectly, on the ability to pass or influence legislation. How does that transfer? How does what they preach or what they believe actually affect or is undertaken by the thoughts of elected officials?
Again, the Democrats tend to, and most people think, that the NRA is buying, is giving a lot of campaign money to these. But actually, they're about, I think, 280th in the donations. There are huge corporations like the oil giants and banking and all that do buy politicians. There's no doubt about that. Contribute huge amounts of money. The NRA funds very, very little, provides very little. It's mainly an endorsement. It's rarely over 5 figures, which is minuscule for these bribes from corporations. So what they do, the NRA is not just a monolith. It has chapters that are created in the grassroots in every county in the United States, some much more active than others. Of course, the ones in the South and the Intermountain West are the most populist. But they're really it's really grassroots, and their single issue in our electoral system. A single issue is a powerful instrument if it has a huge base. And that's very hard to come by because people have their wishes, but it's not always. They're worried more about economics, the what's happening with Wall Street, what's happening with food supply, how to pay their rent, their health care. But these are not things that generate enthusiasm. Their pleas for help. And whereas the gun nuts, as I call them, who are also, really, you put the two together, as I did in my book, white supremacists and gun enthusiasts, and there's definitely an overlap. And gun owners. Because only 30% of the population owns even one gun. And so this really maps over white nationalism.
Well, thank you so much, Roxanne, for joining us today and telling us about the NRA and, of course, in light of the recent tragedies of Texas and Buffalo. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That's all from our Toronto studios tonight. Thank you for tuning in. You can find previous episodes and more on our YouTube or Facebook. For more content, keep watching Muslim Network TV or visit muslimnetwork.tv. Assalamu alaikum and good night.